So coming up this weekend is going to be UFC 298, and we are finally going back to a crowded arena with Volkanovski versus Topuria as the headliner, and UFC 298 is coming up this weekend, and we still don't know the UFC 300 main event, which takes place in a couple of months. I digress. This year, my picks have been okay. They haven't really been great. They haven't really been bad. I started off with an incredible card, and then I had a pretty bad card, which everyone really got shafted on 297, and the card after that. A little bit of a rebound yesterday. A couple guys got completely fraud checked, which did hurt my feelings a little bit because I was kind of hyped to see Piper potentially in the rankings, but it is what it is. To talk about UFC 298, there is a group of guys out there that usually absolutely smash pay-per-view cards, and that is We Want Picks. If you do sign up to We Want Picks, you can get a three-day free trial using my code ARTEM for their premium membership service, which includes all of that. They usually have a lot of great bets out there for 298, and also you get articles from me, and then articles and content from, I believe, like 5 other channels, which is just insane. You also get Angelo and Jacob's bets, as well as just everything right there. I believe Jacob's Lock of the Week is undefeated this week, but that is a free thing you can just see on the We Want Picks channel. With that all out the way, let's now get into the predictions for 298, which is going to be a very international card. We've got fighters from all over the world on this card, you know. It's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. Let's start off the card with Andrea Lee taking on Miranda Maverick. Interesting fight because Miranda Maverick has been looking really good in some fights and then not so good in other fights. She did recently get out-wrestled by Jasmine Desudavicius, but she had a pretty good comeback against Priscilla Cachoeira, who, to be fair, isn't really the greatest fighter in the UFC. And Andrea Lee was on a pretty good run at one point. She had beaten quite a few good competitions. She was ranked relatively highly at this weight class. And then she just recently lost quite a few fights in a row, 3 fights in a row, obviously, to Araujo, who's a pretty good fighter, Barber, who's now up there in the rankings, and Natalia Silva, who is going to be a future title contender with little doubt in my mind. So she's fought good competition, but she's lost to all of the good fighters that she's really fought. Andrea Lee is pretty much a pure Muay Thai kickboxer. She got outstruck in her last fight, and she has been outstruck and out-wrestled in previous fights. Her takedown defense is generally pretty good, but I do think Miranda Maverick's wrestling is going to be good enough to get the fight done. If this fight is stuck on the feet, though, of course Lee is going to be the better striker. I don't have a lot of doubt about that. I'm going to go with Miranda Maverick to win a decision using her wrestling in this one here. I don't think it's going to be a very fun fight, to be honest with you, but that's why it's the first fight on the prelim. So give me Maverick by decision to start off the card. And now we can move on to another fight, which it could be fun, but it's another fight I'm not really too hyped up about. I mean, it's going to be Val Woodburn taking on Oban Elliot. Val Woodburn was the guy that they signed on super short notice to go in there against Bonacool, and he got absolutely smoked by Bonacool. And I kind of predicted that after watching his tape. You can watch his tape pretty easily, if I recall correctly. It's all just out there on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find. But Val Woodburn is just a guy I'm not really that impressed with. I think he was very undersized at 185, which is now why he's come down to 170. But even then, I question a lot about Val Woodburn because he's a striker for the most part, but he clinches a lot, and it just doesn't make sense why he would clinch. He rocks people, and then he'd clinch with them. His fight IQ just isn't that great. His striking's okay. He's very, very powerful, but he only really throws hooks. He's taken on Oban Elliot, who, in my opinion, isn't really much more than a wrestler. I don't think his striking is incredible, but he's a pretty decent wrestler, and he is going to be a lot bigger than Val Woodburn, and I think he's just going to be able to take down Woodburn and beat him up from there. I am going to pick Oban Elliot in this one here. I wouldn't really recommend betting on this fight just because I don't rate both guys that highly. Oban Elliot, though, I will say, he's a character, man. This guy is absolutely hilarious. I wasn't super sold that he beat Kike Brito. I thought it was a draw, but I guess maybe if you had the time or the interest, you could rewatch the fight and come up with your own conclusion, but it wasn't a good fight. I wouldn't really recommend it. But yeah, he's a wrestler for the most part. I think he out-wrestles Val Woodburn. I think Woodburn is too small, even at 170. Even then, I don't think he's ready for the UFC. Oban Elliot, I think, isn't the greatest UFC fighter either, but I definitely think he's going to be good enough to get past Woodburn. So give me Elliot to win by, like, first or second round submission, maybe TKO due to ground and pound. I think he gets Woodburn down pretty easily and just beats him up from there. Now we can move on to this next fight, which is going to be an absolute war. And I believe after this, there's quite a few absolute banger fights that I'm really looking forward to. Josh Quinlan taking on Danny Barlow. These are guys that just absolutely have power at this weight class. My goodness. The right hand of Josh Quinlan has a lot of power. Danny Barlow is called left hand to God because he's got a lot of power in his left hand. He fights in a southpaw position and he can knock guys out with that left hand, man. He's a little bit wild, but I think if he does stay a little bit more reserved, he's going to be a really, really dangerous striker in this weight class. He's got decent takedown defense. He is quite aggressive, but sometimes he can find himself being quite passive as well. I've noticed in his tape. He come off that Dana White's Contender Series win over Raheem Forrest, where he took on a pretty tough stylistic matchup where Forrest is a good wrestler, but he went out there pretty aggressive, rocked Raheem Forrest early, landed that left hand, and it was over after that, man. What a performance from Barlow. Josh Quinlan's kind of an interesting guy because he come in the Contender Series, knocked out Urban, burned a hole in the USADA Cup, and then come back after a year, knocked out Jason Witt, who might be the chinniest UFC fighter in history, with his left hook, and then took on Trey Waters and just spammed left hooks. He's a left hook spamming merchant. I picked him to beat Trey Waters because Waters was coming in on like 4 days notice, and Waters just pieced him up. He outclassed him. He showed Josh Quinlan levels to the game on the feet, really. And Quinlan was just trying to spam that left hook. He was throwing it naked. He was throwing it blindly. I think if he does that against Danny Barlow, he's going to get absolutely sparked, which is why I'm going to pick Danny Barlow here. I think if Josh Quinlan hasn't made improvements, if he hasn't really increased his game, I think that Danny Barlow is going to be able to knock him out. I do think Quinlan's very live to get a KO as well, so I wouldn't be that surprised if I see people picking Quinlan. But just from what I've seen, I think Danny Barlow on the feet just has a little bit more in the toolkit, in the toolbox, I guess. And I think he is going to knock out Quinlan, but both of these guys have crazy power. I think somebody's getting knocked out, and I think someone's getting knocked out in the first round, but I think it's Barlow going to be getting it done. I think he's going to win this matchup here. And then we move on to the second back-to-back banger that probably will end in the first round again. I mean, these guys are light heavyweights that hold a lot of power. Mingyang Zhang taking on Brendson Ribeiro. Brendson Ribeiro fights like Claudio Ribeiro. I'm not sure if they're related. I think there's a photo of them two together on Instagram. Maybe they're brothers, maybe they're cousins, maybe they just have the same surname, but they fight exactly the same. It's kind of crazy. He's very, very untechnical, and he somehow managed to knock out Bruno Lopez. Bruno Lopez looked absolutely terrible in that fight, man. I could not believe how good Ribeiro looked, just kind of smashing him. But the way that Brendson Ribeiro fights, he just kind of runs in there with his chin up in the air, spamming hooks. He's just a hook spammer, really. And he leaves himself super open like Claudio Ribeiro does. Whereas with Mingyang Zhang, I feel like, again, with him, there's actually quite a small sample size to really understand how good he is as a fighter. He's only 25 years old at light heavyweight, and you look at his record, first round finish streak, incredibly impressive. He fought absolutely nobody in China, but then he goes in there against George Tokos, who is a former Bellator fighter that I'm pretty confident the UFC probably wanted to beat Zhang so they could sign him, and he absolutely smoked Tokos, knocked him out brutally, looked really good in the boxing, looked really crispy in the boxing, but once again, only 25 years old. He trains with that fraud from Ukraine who padded his record and faked his record. And then, what was his name? What was that guy that come in with his fake record, and his record was like 25-6 or something, and then by the time the fight rolled around, he was like 23-12 because Sheridog looked into him and found out something was not up. Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure someone knows. I think it starts with an A. But anyway, Mingyang Zhang trains with him, which is a bit scary, I'll be honest, but at least that guy's a pretty decent striker. Zhang is 25 years old at this weight class, which is pretty young. Ribeiro's pretty young as well at 27. Zhang also leaves his hands very low. I was just kind of talking down Ribeiro for leaving his hands and leaving himself open. Zhang's a crispy boxer who likes to use his reach, but man, he leaves his hands low below his waist, and he doesn't have the reach advantage in this matchup though. But I think his boxing's going to be good enough. I do worry though, because Ribeiro does possess crazy power, but I am pretty high on Zhang. As soon as this fight was booked, I did think that Zhang should be able to go out there and get it done. I think Mingyang Zhang's boxing is just going to be good enough to deal with Brendson Ribeiro, so I'm going to pick Mingyang Zhang. There's a lot of people out there picking Ribeiro. I'm not sold on Ribeiro. I'm going to pick Zhang, and I'm going to pick him to win by KO in the first round. And then we move on to Rinya Nakamura taking on Carlos Vera. What are the odds for this going to be? Only minus 850 for Nakamura. Really? Okay, this is a fight I expected Nakamura to be like minus 2,500. But anyway, it's Rinya Nakamura taking on Carlos Vera. Rinya Nakamura, I have been talking about for a pretty long time since I discovered him just through Road to UFC. I actually wasn't that familiar with him until he got onto the tournament. This guy is a future champion in my eyes. I think he could very much be Japan's first ever UFC champion since they don't have one. They've never had one in the history of UFC, even though Japan has still been pretty big and a major player in MMA with Ryzen and Dream and just other promotions from back in the day. They've never had a UFC champion, and I know Tatsuro Taira is really good, but I think Rinya Nakamura is that guy. Rinya Nakamura is a former world champion in freestyle wrestling. He was training to be in the 2020 Olympics, but then when it got delayed, he just thought, you know what? I might as well just train MMA, and it turns out he's pretty damn good at MMA as well. He's a very good boxer. His uncle founded Shuto, I believe, in the 80s, I think it might have been, or the 90s. It's on his Wikipedia if you wanted to learn about that. But yeah, I believe he's also related to, is it Keita Nakamura, who was a former UFC fighter as well. Rinya Nakamura is really good. Former world champion wrestler. His boxing is slick as well, but his boxing can leave himself open at sometimes as well, so he does have concern on the feet. I think his wrestling's going to be good enough to take down Carlos Vera, who I believe is like a dance fighting sort of thing. I think he's got like a kung fu background or something like that. He looked okay on The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, that's what he was called up from on short notice to fight Nakamura after he was on The Ultimate Fighter. He lost to Brad Katona, but he did put on a pretty good performance. Before that, he had fought decent competition and beaten them. But I think Rinya Nakamura is going to be good enough just to take him down and just beat him up on the ground or knock him out on the feet. I'm going to pick Nakamura to win. I'm going to pick him to win by finish in the first 2 rounds. If Nakamura is as good as I think he is, I don't think this fight is close. I don't think it's competitive. I would be very embarrassed if Nakamura lost. Now we can move on. Marcos Rogerio de Lima taking on Justin Tafa, and we're going to be getting into my first underdog pick of the night because I am picking Justin Tafa. I do kind of want to emphasize something though. I'm a massive, massive fan of the Tafa brothers. A huge fan of the Tafa brothers. So maybe there's a little bit of bias, and I do try and put my bias aside, but sometimes it's so hard. But even when I do, I can still come up with a lot of reasons for Justin Tafa to beat Marcos Rogerio de Lima, man. I know de Lima's a wrestler. I know that's what he does. I know he managed to go out there and beat Waldo Cortez Costa with his wrestling. But Waldo doesn't have the power of Justin Tafa. I think if Waldo was to fight Justin Tafa, I even think if Waldo was to fight Junior Tafa, Junior or Justin would knock him out. I genuinely do believe that, which is why I want to see Waldo versus Junior, as they do actually have quite a bit of beef. But now it's Marcos versus Justin Tafa, and this is a bad matchup for Justin Tafa. It is. He doesn't have the best takedown defense in the world, but it's decent. One thing that he does have over Marcos is just better striking and way more power. That's really what it comes down to. Obviously, the cardio can be questioned, but I just think Tafa knocks him out, man. Like, I know you could come up with a really good reason for Marcos to win using the wrestling, because he does have decent wrestling. His jiu-jitsu is really good. I think Justin Tafa's got like a blue belt or a purple belt in BJJ, but you almost wouldn't believe it because his grappling just isn't really used. I mean, he got poked by Austin Lane, but then absolutely slept him with a massive shot to absolutely knock him out cold. That was crazy. I was actually at that event live, and it was big. He hasn't beaten the best guys recently. He beat Harry Hunsucker and Parker Porter. Not the best guys compared to Lima, who I believe is ranked right now, or at least he was ranked at one point. He got knocked out by Derek Lewis, but Derek Lewis went out there with a flying knee. No one expected that. I think this fight lasted a little bit longer than the Lewis fight, but even then, I think if Tafa can keep it at range, I think he sleeps him, man. I genuinely do think Tafa's got good kickboxing, man. He's training with his brother, Junior, who is a former top 10 glory kickboxer at heavyweight. Definitely no joke as a striker. And I believe they've got a brother as well called Gerard Tafa, who's making waves in boxing or kickboxing. One of those two. Anyway, these three Tafa brothers, they're all really good strikers. Two of them are in the UFC. I think Tafa gets it done. I think he knocks out Lima. I know that wasn't really the best breakdown for that fight, but, I mean, it's kind of just Tafa's fights, man. He either knocks you out or he loses trying. So, now we can move on to Amanda Lemos taking on Mackenzie Dern. I know a lot of people out there are just going to say, man, like, Lemos is going to absolutely smoke Dern. I'm picking Lemos, but I'm not that confident in her to do it, just because she was completely out-wrestled and out-grappled by Weili Zhang. I do know that Weili Zhang is a much better wrestler than Mackenzie Dern, because that's the thing that Mackenzie Dern has struggled with her whole career, is she's got really good jiu-jitsu, but she just struggles to get the fights down to the ground. I think her takedown accuracy at one point was like less than 30%, which just isn't very impressive. Fighters can defend her takedowns, and Mackenzie Dern striking, as we learned, maybe isn't that good. It's kind of hard to kind of really put your finger on it, though, because she looked good against Angela Hill on the feet. I know it's Angela Hill, but Angela Hill's a striker. That's what her main sort of thing is. And on the feet, Mackenzie Dern looked good in the striking. And then she goes out there against Jessica Andrade and looks absolutely terrible on the feet. So maybe she just looks really bad on the feet when she's taking on fighters that could potentially knock her out. And Amanda Lemos is a fighter that could potentially knock her out. Lemos is a good grappler in her own right, but for the most part, I would say her chance to win this fight is absolutely to knock out Mackenzie Dern. And I do think she can get it done. There's questions, though. She's almost 37 years old. She's coming off that, honestly, humiliating loss to Weili Zhang, where she got out-wrestled, she got outclassed, she got out-grappled. She looked like she had no chance to win that fight at all. I think she beats Dern, though, man. This is a bad matchup for Dern to come back to, you know, because I feel like, she's not even 31 years old. I feel like Dern could maybe have just come back to, like, an easier fight, but I don't know. I guess maybe Dern's trying to get a title shot ASAP, but I think Lemos knocks her out, to be honest. Tough matchup for Dern. I'm going to go with Lemos. I'm not as confident in her as like a lot of people are, though. But now we can move on to Alexander Hernandez taking on Roman Kopylov. And I'm going to be picking Alexander Hernandez. I just saw the Tapology votes, and most people are picking Kopylov, which I do find interesting because Kopylov's taking this on short notice, to my knowledge. And this is, like, a nightmare matchup for Kopylov. I mean, Anthony Hernandez, not Alexander Hernandez. Anthony Hernandez is a nightmare matchup for many people at 185 pounds. This guy is a really good grappler with insane cardio. He just keeps going and going and going. That's kind of how he kind of fights. You know, he's just constantly pressuring forward. He's constantly going for takedowns. And when he gets them, his grappling is really slick. He's almost like Merab in that sort of way, except he actually gets the takedowns. And more importantly, he's really good at jiu-jitsu when he gets the takedowns down to the ground as well. So I think Hernandez taking on Kopylov. I know that Kopylov's been on an absolute tear recently, and I'm happy for him because he started his career 0-2, and then he beat Takiriko, Punahele Sariano, which was good, and then he beat Ribeiro, and then he went out there against Josh Fremden, knocked him out. Stylistically, though, this is the worst matchup possible for Kopylov. You know, we didn't see him deal with takedowns that great against Duraev. Now, I understand that was 2 years ago, but Hernandez is going to be coming forward, constantly pressuring forward, moving forward, attempting takedowns, and if he gets them, he's going to be the much better grappler in the fight, and I do think he can out-grapple Kopylov, and I do think he can find a submission some point late in the fight, because Kopylov's going to get tired defending those takedowns over and over and over again. I think Hernandez is just going to kind of keep it going and keep it rolling. He recently got Edmund Shabazian, which is a good win. He beat Marc-Andre Barriot, which is a good win. He beat Josh Friend himself by decision that time, which I think he took on short notice himself. He submitted Rodolfo Vieira those years back, which I think was submission of the year. It was up there. I've got Fluffy. I've got Fluffy Hernandez. I think he wins by submission. It's just a nightmare matchup for Kopylov. And now we've got Merab Dvalishvili taking on Henry Cejudo. This isn't going to be liked. You guys are going to hate my pick. I am going to pick Henry Cejudo. I do think Henry Cejudo has a very legitimate chance of beating Merab. And I know a lot of people, you could probably go back and say, like, man, Merab, like, you picked against Merab so many times. Because I think I picked Jan to beat Merab. I picked Merab to beat Aldo, I think. But Aldo could have arguably potentially won that fight. I picked Merab to beat Marias. I mean, everyone did. But, like, Merab's style, man. I think Merab's style is like a good style for Henry Cejudo to beat. I genuinely believe that, because if you do watch his fight, he just, what he does is he's got insane cardio, but he's just attempting takedowns over and over again. But he's not attempting these takedowns with the intentions of actually getting the takedowns. He's not actually trying to take you down. He's just trying to attempt the takedown, put you in a bad position, and control you in the clinch. Whereas when you try and do that against someone like Henry Cejudo is a former gold medalist wrestler. We saw how good his wrestling was when he took on Aljamain Sterling, and obviously in his past when he's fought like years ago, because Cejudo's 37 years old now and hasn't fought very often, like at all ever. The point is, though, we saw how good his wrestling was even against Sterling, because he tried to take down Sterling, but Sterling was just, like, the size difference was there, and obviously Sterling's a good wrestler himself. And I thought Cejudo won that fight. I'll say that right now. I think I'm on a very small boat, but I do believe Cejudo beat Aljamain Sterling. But hey, we'll forget about that, and we'll talk about this fight. Stylistically, I think Henry Cejudo not only has the ability to defend the takedowns on Dvalishvili, I think he has the ability to even reverse situations that Merab is going to be putting himself in, because Merab, he's going to be attempting all of these takedowns, and Cejudo, using his elite, Olympic-level, world-class wrestling, will be able to go out there and obviously connect with Merab closely and get the takedown. And then when he gets Merab down, Merab isn't going to be a guy that's going to have a lot off his back. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure Merab's get-up game is very, very good. But a lot of the time when you take these guys down that are so used to being on top, they don't really have as much on bottom as you would kind of expect. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand again that he trains with Sterling, and I'm sure he's got his jiu-jitsu going up, training with Matt Serra and like everyone at that team. I think Cejudo's got it. I think Cejudo can beat him. I think Cejudo is a good stylistic. I think Cejudo's a bad stylistic matchup for Merab. Don't get me wrong. If Merab beats Cejudo, you've got to do Merab versus O'Malley. You really do. I thought Cejudo beat Sterling. And I think Merab, stylistically for Cejudo, is an easier fight than Aljamain Sterling, because Merab is going to actively look for those wrestling positions. And I think Cejudo's a good enough wrestler to go out there and take Merab down and reverse those situations that Merab's going to put himself in. It's a 3-round fight as well, which maybe benefits Cejudo. I understand you could say, well, Merab's just going to be coming over and over again for 3 rounds. Cejudo, though, I mean, Cejudo for 3 rounds, I mean, that's one thing you could have said about the Sterling fight, is he slowed down a little bit in the 4th and the 5th, potentially. He's only got 3 rounds now to just out-wrestle Merab. I think Cejudo's got good enough cardio to wrestle constantly for 15 minutes. I think he goes out there. I think he beats Merab. I think he beats Merab by decision, by out-wrestling him, because Merab's not going to be going for takedowns over and over again without the intention of actually getting the takedowns. And Cejudo is going to be able to go out there and reverse those positions. So that's a long underdog pick, but I just know everyone's going to be on Merab. Let's move on to Geoff Neal taking on Ian Garry. The press conference could be good, but I just don't see Geoff Neal kind of being the guy to go after Ian Garry. There's a lot of ammunition on Ian Garry, though. Oh, it's actually kind of insane, the situation that he's put himself in, I'll be honest. But I think Garry beats Neal. I really do think he beats Neal. I think in Garry, although he's very unbearable as a person, and in my opinion, he kind of always has been, but now even more so, it's kind of a lot to digest. I feel like I don't like in Garry for like a different reason to a lot of people, but I guess we'll see. In Garry, I think he beats Geoff Neal. He's a phenomenal fighter, and he's a really, really good striker. I know Geoff Neal's a really good boxer, and one thing I will say about Geoff Neal as well is he made Shavkat look really human in that fight. And don't get me wrong, Shavkat is such a good fighter, but Geoff Neal put him in some bad positions in that fight. He landed some really good shots using his very good boxing, and Shavkat kind of had to revert to the wrestling a little bit. Shavkat kind of had to reset. I think Shavkat maybe thought that the fight wasn't as easy as he potentially expected it to be. But Ian Garry's just one of those fighters, and I've said this kind of throughout his career. He just rises to the occasion, because he looked really bad in his debut, and then I thought he looked pretty bad against Darian Weeks. I thought he looked pretty bad against Gabe Green. He got dropped by Kanan Song and then proceeded to dominate the fight. And then he fought Daniel Rodriguez, a massive step up in competition from Kenan Song and the fighters he was fighting before. Knocked him out with a head kick. And then he goes out there and beats Neal Magny, dominates him with the leg kick. Wasn't able to finish him, which was a little bit disappointing, but Magny's a very tough guy to finish. And we kind of learned that with the Mike Malott situation, I guess. I think Garry, the way that he fights is he uses his kicks, he uses his kickboxing, he fights from range, and Geoff Neal is a boxer. Geoff Neal's going to be wanting to close the distance, which could stylistically be a good matchup for him. Maybe Geoff Neal, if he pushes forwards and closes off the distance between the two. Sorry guys, I just kicked my mic with my hands, so I hit my mic. Anyway, if he closes off the distance, shuts Garry down, doesn't give Garry the space to kick, to use his long kicks, to use his body kicks, to use his leg kicks, to use his push kicks that he occasionally uses as well to get space, then maybe Geoff Neal can outbox him, because in pure boxing, Geoff Neal will be the better boxer. That's what he is for the most part. Neal can wrestle as well, and that's another one about Garry. We've never really seen him grapple, and I even think Geoff Neal might be quite smart to mix in the boxing with the wrestling, because obviously when a lot of fighters that are wrestlers become boxer wrestlers, if that makes sense, because boxing closes the distance to get into wrestling range. You know, boxing range is not the same as kicking range. You can kick further than you can punch. So if Geoff Neal can close the distance using his punches, maybe we even see a takedown attempt or two from Geoff Neal, because we haven't seen really any grappling from Garry in his UFC career. I know he went to Brazil for a bit to train his jiu-jitsu. I'm sure his grappling's good. I'm sure his takedown defense is good. We've just never really had to see him deal with it. But I think Garry beats Geoff Neal. I am actually on the Garry by decision. Okay, I just checked Tapology for the first time. I thought a lot of people would be on Garry by KO. I'm on Garry decision. I think he beats Geoff Neal. I think Neal might have moments. I think he might get a takedown. I think maybe he might rock Garry at one point, maybe. But I think for the most part, Gary's going to be the minute winner. I think he's going to be landing more strikes. I think he's going to be landing more volume. And I think ultimately he's going to win the decision. And now we've got Robert Whittaker taking on Paulo Costa. I'm picking Whittaker, but you could pick Paulo Costa, and I honestly would kind of understand it. And the reason why is we just saw Robert Whittaker get absolutely smoked by Dricus du Plessis. And although I'm kind of on the side of Dricus du Plessis beating Sean Strickland, Dricus du Plessis he's not super impressive. And if you watch his fights, you'll kind of understand what I mean, because Dricus du Plessis is not a very technical guy. He just comes forward constantly and just throws volume constantly with decent power behind it. And maybe it was the power that shocked Robert Whittaker, because, you know, Whittaker had success against Adesanya, he had success against other people. I mean, he had success against Jared Cannonier, who's obviously a very powerful dude. But maybe just Dricus du Plessis, like when he landed some big shots on Whittaker, Whittaker got surprised. And maybe Paulo Costa could go out there, because Paulo Costa's a big dude with a lot of power, and put a big shot on Whittaker early and just kind of, you know, ride the fight out from there, constantly moving forward, bombing away. But I think Whittaker's just too good still. But maybe, I don't know. I feel like if Whittaker loses to Costa, a lot of people love Robert Whittaker, so you're not going to want to hear me say this, but if Robert Whittaker loses to Paulo Costa, I think it might be over for Whittaker, you know, but I'm pretty confident he can beat Costa. Costa looks bad against Luke Rockhold. I know it was at elevation, and, you know, a lot of fighters, every single fighter on that card except for Kamaru Usman gassed out fighting there. But he looks really bad against Luke Rockhold. You know, he was taken down by Luke Rockhold at times. He was outstruck by Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold was like making punches obvious that he was going to throw them. He'd drop a hand and throw an overhand, like, while screaming at Paulo Costa, and Costa would still get hit by them. I think Robert Whittaker, his boxing is nice. He's got a good jab. I think his boxing is going to be too good to deal with Costa. I even think that Whittaker, like, maybe could go for some takedowns, because he has gone out there and wrestled against a lot of opponents, especially against striking opponents. I think he can take down Paulo Costa if he wants to. I think he can outbox Paulo Costa if he wants to. He's shown levels against pretty decent fighters like Martin Vettori. Just kind of showed Martin Vettori that Vettori ain't all that, to be honest. I think he beats Costa. Could Costa knock out Whittaker? Yeah, I mean, I genuinely could see it. If Costa went out there and knocked out Robert Whittaker, I don't think I'd be as surprised as most people. So, I'm going to pick Robert Whittaker. I'm going to pick Whittaker by decision. But I'm worried. I feel like that Dricus du Plessis fight, man, it could be the beginning of the end. Is it over for Robert Whittaker? We're about to find out. I'm picking Whittaker. Let's move on. Alexander Volkanovski taking on Ilia Topuria. I'm seeing a lot of people picking Ilia Topuria. A surprising amount of people picking Ilia Topuria. I'm gonna pick Volk, man. I just think with Volkanovski at 145 pounds, he's just so good. Like, he's just so good at 145 pounds. He went up there on short notice against Islam Makhachev. I picked Islam Makhachev to win, but I didn't think he was just gonna knock out Volk like that, which was kind of sad to see. But Volk I mean, he said like he was drinking beers every single day for 2 weeks before he took that fight. I mean, Volkanovski must be an absolute party animal, or maybe he's just having a beer after dinner or something. I don't know what Volk's up to, that man. Anyway, Volk looked pretty unprepared for Islam Makhachev, to say the least, but he took the fight on 5 days' notice, so I don't take too much from that performance. I think a lot of people take more from that performance than most people. One thing I do take, though, from Volkanovski is just how dominant he's looked at 145 pounds. It was only 7 months ago that he showed levels to Yair Rodriguez, took him down at will, beat him up on the feet at times as well, and just looked really, really good in that matchup. Before that, he had a very close fight with Islam only 11 months ago, and before that, he was beating up Max Holloway on the feet. He beat up the Korean Zombie on the feet in the most dominant title defense of all time. Elliot Topuria is a different beast, though. Topuria is a guy that I think it could be fair to say Volkanovski hasn't really fought before, I guess maybe at this level, because Volkanovski, he struggles against shorter opponents. He looks really, really good against these taller opponents because of striking style. He likes to close the distance. He likes to pressure forward. And he likes to get in there where he can land his hooks and his big shots and then also shoot for takedowns as well. Just because I do believe, and I've said this for a long time, Volkanovski is the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC. I've been saying that for maybe 2 years and people disagreed with me, which just doesn't make sense. Volkanovski is the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC. His striking's incredible. His wrestling's incredible. His grappling's incredible. But Ilia Topuria is a short guy with a lot of power for 145. He's a big guy as well with incredible grappling. In fact, I would almost say his grappling is better than his striking. But most people know him for his striking. Most people know him for his boxing. Ilia Topuria is a short guy, obviously, and he likes to do what Volkanovski does. He likes to get in there and gets in close. He likes to be able to throw big hooks as well. And Volkanovski is going to be trying to do the same thing, so they're both going to probably be spending a lot of this fight in boxing range. And I think it would be fair to say that Topuria has more power than Alexander Volkanovski. And Topuria's pure grappling is really good as well. You know, we just saw him beat Josh Emmett pretty dominantly. We saw him beat Bryce Mitchell by submission after absolutely smashing him on the feet. It almost looked like Bryce Mitchell wanted absolutely nothing to do with the striking in that fight. He had a lot of complications against Jai Herbert, though, I will say. He got knocked down by Jai Herbert, and then he absolutely smoked Jai Herbert with a KO, a beautiful KO. Knocked out Hall as well. I think Volkanovski's the guy, though, that would be able to look at Topuria and find weaknesses and exploit them. I think Volkanovski is still that good. I think he's still that guy. And Topuria is coming into this fight, I think, overconfident, which can be a very, very good thing. But it could maybe be a bad thing. If he overlooks Volkanovski, if he overlooks one of the guys that a lot of people say is one of the best featherweights of all time, and maybe still has the ability to go out there and defend a lot of titles, I think he could get humbled a little bit by Volk. I think Volk's really good at striking. I think he's really good at wrestling. We've seen Topuria go 5 rounds, though. But I think if Volk puts on a pace, we've seen Volk go 5 rounds. I worry a little bit about the turnaround with the KO. There's questions. I'm going to pick Volk. It's actually a low confidence pick, although I just talked about both guys a lot, but I think Volk, he's still so great. He's still so great. I know he's 35, and no 35-year-old I don't think has actually won a title. He's still so great. You know, he's still so good. He's so good at 145 pounds. This is his weight class. He's been talking about 155. I'd rather he didn't, to be honest. I'd rather he just stuck with 145 and just kind of chased greatness at this weight class. I think he's still good enough, man, to beat Topuria. I do think he's that good. I think he's that guy. I think Volkanovski wins the fight. Let me know what you think of that pick. Let me know what you think in the comments below about every pick on this card. I'm picking a couple underdogs. overall, my picks for this fight card, I'm actually relatively confident in them. I think that I've got some reads on here. I've got a lot of low confidence picks though. But yeah, I think I've got some interesting ones too. I'm picking Cejudo. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.